I'm introducing Don Motanik. He's a Umatilla tribal member. He's been a technical specialist with ITC for 20 years. He retired from BIA in 2012 after spending 34 years as a forest engineer at the Yakima Agency, forest manager at Umatilla and Spokane Agency, and regional forester in Billings, Montana. His career started in 1974 as a firefighter working for the Seattle Water Department in the Seattle watershed, located in North Bend, Washington. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in forest engineering from the University of Washington in 1978. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Don Motanik.
Thank you, Jennifer. One thing I'd like to know and appreciate is Jennifer did a great job in introductions. We kind of went over that during the breakfast and how I remember myself when I was younger, just how difficult things were as a youth, and especially speaking in front of people. And that's one of the toughest things, I think, for Native people, that we're good storytellers, but a lot of times we're not good at telling our story just because of how we're raised and historical trauma and those types of things. And I think that's one of the reasons I've always been involved, or one reason I've retired, but I'm going to stick around just because I know how tough it was as a young person getting through school, and I'll be dedicated forever, I hope. But my part of for this session is kind of go over briefly as we go through the workforce session, is to first start out with the IFMET report that we talked about at the Tuesday session, and also you heard it mentioned. IFMET, particularly in the report, is Task C, evaluate staffing patterns, BIA plus the tribes. A few other things that were added in this last IFMET report was looking at the workforce education and recruitment and retention. We had some students, Sarah Hoagland and Brianna Gervais, were part of the group. This is something that's been alluded to in the report, and one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we had youth camps as kind of the kickoff this morning before lunch, because when you look at this graph, it really tells the story. When you look at the age, USDA permanent employees, it's 10%. As far as the workforce, 10% are the age 30 and below. And then look at with the BIA and tribal forestry and fire. They mentioned this during the fire workshop on Monday, and there's a 1.5%. So we need to get our youth more involved in forestry. So that's one of the reasons later on you'll be hearing more about some of the initiatives that Adrian will talk on in the afternoon. Just going over this quickly before we do get in, just more of to refresh everybody if people haven't actually read the report. There's a lot, especially Volume 2 really gets into the workforce issue and Task C, but going over some of the recommendations, overall staffing has continued to decline, down 21% from 2001 and 13% below the baseline. And I think Dave Coate this morning was highlighting, I think he mentioned there, since 2012, there's actually been, I think, like another 200 employees as far as people that have been retiring. So it's really things that we need to start paying attention to. Reductions in firefighting over the last 10 years have led to a 36% reduction in fire staff. 3, staffing and position analysis workforce survey data indicate that a need for a 65% increase in staff for Indian forestry programs. Recommendation 4, Indian forestry operations are understaffed as compared to other public and private forest management organizations. Some more of the recommendations: the percent of professionals in the workforce has increased for second straight decade, but they're still lower than the state and private forestry operations. The number of Native American forestry professionals has increased. 7, the tribal foresters report an increasing amount of staff time is spent in the pursuit of outside granted opportunities. One thing that during our board meeting, we looked at this particular workshop, and I think there was probably about 10, it's almost everybody wanted to address every single recommendation, and we just can't do that, you know, at one particular workshop. So we did have to do some sorting and prioritizing on what we were going to do at this particular workshop. Like item number 8, they did talk about this at the below average salary and benefit package offered by many tribes hamper recruitment and retention efforts. That's something that the fire workshop identified, particularly in the Northwest. And that was another item that people want to address, but we thought priority-wise that we didn't want to address that at this particular workshop. An aging forest will result in more staff losses. Tribal forestry programs lack access to needed technical support. Then we get into those are some of the staff issues that IFMET identified. Then as far as the education, when they looked at it, education access of Native Americans to natural resource program is improving, but many challenges still exist. 2 tribal college natural resource programs have increased in number and enrollments. And you heard today that Phil Rigdon was talking about the great thing, we're getting more universities actually partnering with the Intertribal Timber Council. Oregon State University, first 2 that the Salish Kootenai College, if somebody gets a Picard scholarship, their full tuition is covered. Is that right, Adrian? Yeah. And also at the University of Washington. The University of Washington did waver a little bit on whether they were going to cover the full tuition, but Phil Rigdon went back up to University of Washington, did some talking, and they're actually matching it again, so that's great. But the good news is that Phil was talking earlier this morning that Oregon State University has signed on and actually will match the $2,500. So that was new this year. NAU, Northern Arizona University, has also signed. They just signed it this week. That we just got the agreement this week that signed that they will also match it. There's other universities that are actually coming to ITC and wanting to match. And Phil's working on Yale right now. So keep our fingers crossed. We hopefully that Yale may be the next university. So there's good things that are happening. And the great thing, the colleges are coming to us. That's something that, because of IFMET and the word that's getting out, the students, the other thing is the students are actually doing a lot of the work too. I know Sarah Hoagland at NAU did a lot of work with Orvi Danzuka at Oregon State, worked with Oregon State. So if you're a student with a university, it pays to get involved with the forestry program, SAF. That's what the university presidents of forestry are listening to, and why the enrollments are going up. They see that. Out of the 7 educational programs empowered by NIFMA, only the cooperative education program is being implemented, but there's been some change to that. Adrian will talk a little bit about what's been going on with the BIA and the program. Education, number 4, education focus, group discussion. Young people are becoming disconnected with the land. That's something that Victoria Wesley will be talking about, what they're doing up at San Carlos in her presentation. Item 5, access to training and continuing education continues to be an issue for the BIA. And item 6, BIA lack of coordinated research or research advocacy has led to the tribes being underserved by the federal and academic research institutions. And one of the things that you've seen at lunchtime on Tuesday, where several of our students have received a grant from a partnership between the ITC and the Forest Service. The Southwest Research Station provided $25,000, and so that's something that's actually addressing that, starting to address this particular item, number 6. The if recommendations talks about the $254 million annually for staff. I put at one time it was 800, now it's actually another 200 that's needed. Item 2, BIA delivery of technical services needs to be analyzed at the programmatic level and restructured to increase its effectiveness. 3, the BIA should work with tribes to develop a strategic plan to recruit, train, and retain tribal forestry professionals and technicians. More of the recommendations, the BIA should have a national education coordinator. And item 2, recommendation to implement the education programs envisioned by NIFMRA. And I've listed them there: the intern program, co-op, scholarship program, forest education outreach, post-graduation recruitment, postgraduate intergovernmental internships, and continuing education and training. That's one thing we'll be addressing today, that Don Peterson, the technician, logger training, it'll be something that will be covered this afternoon. And increase the programmatic support and cooperation with tribal colleges is needed by both BIA and tribes. $1 million per year should be made available to tribes for the support of youth internships and nature and culture camps. There has been in FY14 and 15. Adrian will be talking about that. BIA should provide approximately $1.3 million per year for continuing education. Recommendation 6. Larry, was there correction?
11.3.
Oh, 11.3 million. I need my bifocals adjusted. And my bifocals in my brain. But item 6, or recommendation 6, a strategy similar to the National Agriculture Leadership Network should be developed. That's something later on this afternoon myself and Mary Parker from Macaw, who have gone through the Washington Ag Leadership Program, will talk to make a presentation about our experience with that particular network. And at a national level, recommendation 7, a national level advocacy and support for building research partnerships between tribes and research institutions is needed. And I mentioned that's something that is happening. And I'll go ahead, and that starts to get into my presentation this afternoon. But just wanted to give an overview before we start getting into addressing some of these particular items I had mentioned before during our ITC board meeting, because of education, also in business, supporting the infrastructure of forest products. There are groups like the Oregon Native American Business and Entrepreneur Network. We wanted to get into small business, but there was just too much, even with the 4 areas that we were looking at today, that we figured that we would work on these recommendations. If people in the audience do feel that there's other recommendations that ITC should be working on, we appreciate your input. But for today, we're looking at 4 things. We're looking at our youth camps to give a presentation of what's going on, so the youth camps that have been funded and ongoing for years. And then 2 is with the education, higher education and staffing issues that Adrian will be talking about, or actually 3. The second one is actually Don Peterson. And Don Peterson is a forestry consultant that works with logging certification, has developed a master's loggers program that's actually utilized at Menominee, and that's something that during last year's symposium, Colville and Yakima really talked about, that the infrastructure and the markets are there, but one of the things they're missing are the loggers and the technicians, and that's one of our responses, is bringing Don Peterson. The Forest Products Lab from the Forest Service helped fund Don coming here, and has opened the door and said if ITC has a proposal to send to the Forest Products Lab, they would entertain that. So I guess today, as you listen to Don's presentation, dream big. What can we think, or what can we request from the Forest Products Lab. And again, I mentioned Adrian's presentation, and then the fourth part will be Mary Parker and I talking about our our ag forestry leadership experiences and the work and fun and how our careers have both expanded over the years. So with that, I really appreciate everybody coming. Appreciate Coquille for having the symposium this year. I hope everybody can think and even beyond this workshop is think of ideas and questions we can ask and proposals we can put together for different agencies and foundations to help our tribal communities. So thank you.